Most people remember this scene for this. Patsy shows up drunk in Tony Soprano's backyard, points a gun at him through the window while Tony sits inside completely unaware, and then, instead of firing, walks over to the swimming pool and casually pisses in it. It's funny, and it's the kind of thing that gets clipped and shared with no context, because the gap between what almost happened and what actually happened is ridiculous. But Patsy had all of it. He had the motive and the opportunity, and a clear shot through the glass at the man who had his twin brother killed. But instead, he lowered the gun. I don't think that's cowardice, and I don't think he just sobered up. I think Patsy does the math in that backyard and reaches a conclusion nobody else in this show is capable of reaching. To understand it, you have to start with the brother Tony took from him. Philly, known as Spoons, was in Junior's crew, and after Junior's defeat at the end of Season 1, Tony starts clearing out anyone who could still cause him problems. Philly's been running his mouth about Tony too, including the story about Tony wanting to smother his own mother with a pillow, which happens to be true. He's also the kind of guy who might have moved up to boss with Junior locked away. So he's a political problem and a personal insult at the same time. Gigi asks him for a ride from the airport. Philly talks the whole way, no idea the decision's already been made, and Gigi shoots him in the head. There's no confrontation and no warning, because Tony decides he's a problem, sends someone to handle it, and gets on with his life. Patsy's the one left living with it. The show doesn't let you look away from his grief either. On the birthday he used to share with Philly, Patsy sits at Satriali's and tells everyone his brother was born 11 minutes after him.
Today would have been our birthday.
Our birthday.
He talks about what it's like being an identical twin, says he can't really understand it from the outside. Christopher keeps asking questions, while Tony tries to steer the conversation somewhere else. Then Patsy says he's heard identical twins sometimes die within days of each other, and that would have been fine with him.
Don't it happen that identical twins, a lot of times, they'll die within a couple of days of each other?
That would have been okay with me, believe me.
Hey, look at these.
He's talking about wanting to die, sitting a few feet from the man who caused it. Tony can't acknowledge any of it, obviously, so he changes the subject, offers him food, tells him to leave the morbid stuff with Junior's crew. Grief becomes an inappropriate conversation topic. Patsy's allowed to miss his brother, quietly, on his own time, as long as it never makes the man responsible uncomfortable. It gets worse when Tony finds out Patsy's been drinking and talking. Word gets back that Patsy's been saying people can smile in your face while being villains underneath, and that he knows how his brother died and who did it. Tony asks how Patsy could possibly know, and Silvio gives him the answer that's actually sitting right there. Patsy shows up to work every day and looks into the eyes of the man he believes had his twin killed and still has to smile, take orders, act like part of the crew. Then Silvio says something that explains the whole situation. Part of Patsy loves Tony. That's the trap, right there. Patsy belongs to an organization that murdered his brother, and that same organization pays him, protects him, gives him a place in the world. Tony's his enemy and his boss simultaneously. His hatred has to live in the same body as his loyalty and his dependence, and 20 years of history, and none of those things cancel each other out. They just sit there together. Tony's answer is to keep him close and watch him. He's already moved Patsy out of Junior's crew partly for that reason, and the conversation with Silvio ends with the obvious option hanging in the air, that if Patsy becomes too much of a risk, they can always kill him too. That's what Patsy carries into the backyard. He's drunk because sober Patsy has been functional for months. The alcohol is what gets the grief to the surface, gets him through the gate, across the lawn, close enough to raise the gun. What it can't do is make the decision for him. He's looking at Tony inside his own house, surrounded by the ordinary life all of this bought him. Same Tony who had Philly killed from a comfortable distance, who never had to watch the family get the news, who probably spent more time worrying about how Patsy would react than thinking about Philly as an actual person. And Patsy could flip the whole thing in about a second, turning Tony into the dead brother and Carmela and the kids into the family left behind, giving them the exact phone call his own family got. There's just a price on it. Killing Tony almost certainly ends Patsy's life too. The organization hunts him. His wife and kids lose him. Whatever security he's built disappears. Maybe he's dead that night, maybe he's arrested next week, maybe he spends the rest of his life running. And here's the part Patsy doesn't even know about. The FBI is watching the house that night. They see him in the backyard, gun in hand, and they recognize him, and they genuinely don't know what to do about it, whether to intervene and blow their entire wiretap operation or let it happen. Patsy thinks he's alone out there. He's got an audience the whole time, so the real question in that backyard comes down to how many members of his family Tony gets to take. Tony already took Philly. Pulling the trigger hands him Patsy too. Patsy might be the one holding the gun, but Tony would still be the one deciding how the rest of his life goes. That's what brings him back down. He lowers it because he's got kids, a wife, a future that still exists. Revenge buys him one moment of satisfaction and then takes everything. Living means swallowing this every single day, forever, and it also means Tony doesn't get the second Parisi brother, and the show proves later that fear had nothing to do with it. When Tony needs Gloria Trillo scared off, Patsy handles it. He takes her on a test drive, pulls into an isolated spot, and puts a gun on her. His voice never rises. He explains exactly what happens if she contacts Tony again, and he means it. There's no panic in him, no shaking, no hesitation at all. Patsy is completely capable of violence once he's decided on it. That scene with Gloria shows you how dangerous he actually is, that he knows how to use fear without getting emotional about it, how to convince someone they're seconds from dying and then hand the car keys back like nothing happened. The man in the backyard is running on grief instead of a plan, and once the emotion drops, the practical part of him comes back online. He understands that shooting Tony satisfies the dead and destroys the living, and he picks the people who still need him, which is what makes the next thing so absurd. He pisses in the pool. It's funny because of how small it is next to what he was about to do. He goes from pointing a gun at the boss of New Jersey to secretly urinating in the guy's backyard. But the humiliation is the point. Patsy can't punish Tony in any way that counts. He can't confront him, can't expose him, can't even ask for an explanation. Tony controls the family, the money, the rules, all of it. So Patsy needs a form of revenge that nobody will ever find out about. The pool gives him one. Tony's house is everything the position bought him, the big place, the landscaped yard, the pool that separates him from the guys working under him. Patsy helps generate that wealth and then goes home to less protection and less power. Pissing in the pool violates Tony's private world in a way Tony will never know about, which makes it both perfectly safe and almost completely meaningless. It also lets him leave. He walked into that yard about to make the biggest decision of his life. He walks out having committed an insult only he'll ever know about. The revenge becomes private, same as the grief Tony expects him to keep to himself. Tony gets to him eventually, finds him working alone, and asks straight out if he's got a problem.
You got a problem?
What, Tom?
I said, you got a problem.
With what, Tom?
I don't know. I heard maybe you got a fucking problem, like you don't like being here.
Patsy plays dumb. Tony asks again, says he heard Patsy might not like being there. Patsy says he likes being there. Tony keeps pushing, asks if he's sure, and when Patsy answers, Tony tells him not to say it unless he means it.
I don't know. I heard maybe you got a fucking problem, like you don't like being here.
I like being here.
You sure?
Yeah.
You sure?
Yeah.
Don't say you're sure if you're not sure.
That sounds like an invitation to be honest. Patsy knows being honest gets him killed. Tony's already heard about the drinking and the accusations. What he's doing is giving Patsy a chance to say the right words out loud. There's a correct answer to this conversation and both men know exactly what it is. Then Tony brings up the house Patsy bought for his daughter after joining the crew.
Who was telling me you bought your daughter a nice house, after you came over with us? Yeah, that's nice.
Wonderful thing.
The order matters here. Money first. Tony reminds him that working under him made his family's life better, that there's a material reason to stay quiet. Only then does he mention Philly. Asks whether Patsy's over it.
And your brother, bon animal. You've recovered from that shit there. You put your grief behind you.
Patsy doesn't forgive Tony. He performs forgiveness so he can keep breathing, and Tony takes the performance, because the performance is all he actually needs. Patsy has verbally signed off on the official version of reality. Grief's over, brother's gone, business continues. Then Tony closes it out by asking about Patsy's younger son, suggesting he bring the kid around to hang out with AJ, get something to eat, use the pool. Tony has no idea what happened next to that pool. For Patsy, that invitation has to land like another warning. Tony's pulling the next generation into this. Their kids can be friends. Their families can get closer. Every new connection gives Patsy more to lose, which is how Tony uses warmth and intimidation interchangeably. He mentions the house he provided for one child, demands a statement about the dead brother, then invites another child into his home. So money and grief and family all end up in the same conversation. The offer is generous. It's also suffocating. Patsy takes the deal. For the rest of the series, he works under Tony with genuinely surprising reliability, carries out orders, handles business, rarely makes trouble. He even threatens Gloria on Tony's behalf, protecting the private life of the man he once showed up to kill. Every one of those acts makes the backyard stranger. The easy explanation is that Patsy eventually moved on. Time passed, his family did well, staying angry forever would have destroyed him. I don't think the grief goes anywhere. I think Patsy learns where he's allowed to put it. Tony shuts it down at Satriali's when the birthday comes up. forces him to announce out loud that it's finished when it turns into a business problem, and sits inside that house while Patsy lowers the gun in the backyard. Every door gets closed one at a time, so the grief goes underground, and Patsy carries it quietly, because quiet men live longer in this world. That matters more than it looks near the end. During the war with New York, Patsy's in the car with Silvio when the shooters come for them outside the Bing. Silvio gets hit several times. Patsy returns fire, runs into the woods, and gets away, surviving another situation that should have killed him. By the finale, Meadow is engaged to Patsy's son Patrick. Patsy and his wife are sitting in Tony and Carmela's house talking about the wedding, and Tony's talking about Patsy becoming family. The man who came to that backyard with a gun might end up sharing grandchildren with the man he came to kill. Tony sees all of it as good news. Patrick's successful, Meadow's happy, and the marriage builds a respectable connection between the families. He's even dangling Carlo's old crew in front of Patsy as leverage to pressure Polly into taking the job. From one angle, Tony won completely. He killed Philly, made Patsy work for him, and then slowly absorbed the surviving brother's family into his own. Patsy's son marries Tony's daughter. The Parises get permanently tied to the man who caused their grief in the first place. From another angle, Patsy did. He lowered the gun, and he survived. He got money, influence, a closer position next to Tony. His son's marrying into Tony's family through an actual legitimate relationship. Tony now thinks he's valuable enough to run a crew. The guy standing outside the window slowly ended up inside the house, which is where the theory that Patsy set up Tony's death starts to get tempting. The motive never really goes away. Patsy survived the war while Tony lost Bobby and Silvio. He knows the organization, knows Tony's habits, and has a family connection that could tell him where Tony's going to be. His last scenes have enough awkwardness in them to keep the suspicion breeding. The show never confirms a second of it. We never see Patsy contact New York or arrange anything. Surviving the attack on Silvio could just be luck. The awkwardness at Tony's house could easily be the discomfort of Tony pouring him a drink as a future in-law while still being his boss. And honestly, turning Patsy into the mastermind behind the ending makes the backyard scene worse, not better. It swaps a genuinely complicated decision for a long revenge plan the series never bothers to prove. Patsy doesn't need to kill Tony later for that scene to mean something. The decision's already finished. He picks his living family over his dead brother. He accepts humiliation because humiliation is survivable. He lets Tony believe the grief is past because the alternative is another dead Parisi. That's what separates him from most of the guys around him, because Richie and Ralph and Phil are all run by pride, and they push an insult until the response destroys them. Patsy sees the limit, and he knows Tony has more power, more protection, and more men willing to act on his behalf. So Patsy adapts instead, keeps earning, protects his kids, stays useful, and waits while Tony's circle collapses one person at a time. By the last episode, Tony's facing an indictment with his organization in pieces, and Patsy's still standing there. Maybe he really did put the grief behind him. Maybe it's sitting behind every smile he's ever given Tony. The part that matters is that Tony never gets to know which. Tony forces him to say the sentence out loud. Patsy gives him the words and keeps the truth. The same silence that makes him look submissive is the one thing in his life Tony can't reach. He walked into that backyard to avenge his brother. He lowered the gun because he understood what firing it would actually accomplish. Philly stays dead. Patsy's kids lose their father. Tony destroys the entire family either way, even if he dies doing it. Walking away is the only thing that denies him that. The revenge Patsy can actually guarantee is survival. He lives long enough to watch Tony lose friends, soldiers, and control. Long enough for Tony to welcome the Parisis into his home. Long enough to become one of the last experienced men left in New Jersey. The gun would have given him a few seconds. Lowering it gave him the rest of his life.